Joining us on the program now from the Free Speech Union, Jillaine, Heather, kia ora. Welcome to the program today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Thanks for having me on again.
Now, last time I checked, and things are changing quite quickly on this one, the BSA doesn't control the internet. It controls broadcasters, of which, of course, Rhema Media, we're a broadcaster. We're subject to the rules and rulings of the BSA. That is the structure. We submit to that, and there's been no problems in our nearly 50 years of broadcasting. Well, not many. However, the BSA saying, you know what, we'd also like to control internet-based radio stations, in particular Sean Plunkett and the platform. To be fair, he has been getting under a few people's skin, and he's very good at doing that. But firstly, what's your take on this? What has unfolded in this area, Jillaine?
Andrew, I find this whole situation very, very curious. As you said, the Broadcasting Standards Authority was set up to monitor broadcasts, particularly when there were spectrum that was bought and sold by the New Zealand government or licensed, and very much in a model where the broadcasters could capture the nation or be the only ones talking to the nation, right?
Yeah.
There was not a lot of competition there. Now, we have moved on to an area where everyone has a voice, can have a voice, and gets online and expresses that voice. So in an area where the Broadcasting Association seem to say there's a gap, we don't have coverage over this, they've gone to the government to ask it for clarification, the government has pushed back and said no. Then last week to issue an interim order just to sort of say that we have now jurisdiction over you because you look like a radio and you're subject to our rules. I am concerned for freedom of expression, obviously, and for the BSA stepping in as the censors of the internet.
This is a murky area, and to be fair, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I was a broadcaster, plain and simple. That's what I did. I talked on the radio. Now, it's a bit more vague because, yes, I talk on the radio. I also have a YouTube channel. We have a podcast. There's various different ways of engaging. That doesn't mean that I stop being a broadcaster. It's just there's no firewall between traditional media, mainstream media, as Sean Plunkett's fond of describing it as, and this new emerging form of social media. So it's kind of like the technology's evolved to work around the legislation, which it often tends to do. Perhaps it's not a surprise that the legislation or the regulators are wanting to catch up on this one.
It doesn't surprise me that the regulators want to continue to be relevant, and to be relevant in this age, it very much talks about you need to be relevant in the online space or on the internet. I just don't think that the Broadcasting Standards Authority and the legislation that they've got at the moment, I don't believe at all that it values freedom of expression highly enough or highlights your right not to be offended. And I don't want to see this. I do call it as either scope creep or a land grab. I don't want to see the automatic extension over voices that are online, because it was a very different association when it was set up and when this legislation was put into place, and it was to monitor the voice of the nation, because we had we didn't have many options to who we listened to or how we listened. We've got too many options now, I would put to you, Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, the BSA may not be the right regulator, but there seems to be a concern publicly and certainly at a government level for some form of regulation. For Minister Goldsmith to say, hey, look, this falls through the cracks. We need to have something in place. In the meantime, could you guys cover this while we set up something a little bit more robust? Is that a valid response, or still very much in that overreach category in your view?
In my view, it's kicking the can down the road and in the overreach category.
Yep.
It's been identified that this has been a gap for many, many years. It doesn't surprise anyone. And to seem to suggest that it's okay to put a citizen or to put an organisation through a court case or to have to test these boundaries in an area that's been self-admittedly murky and unsure of what of whether it applies or not, I actually think is an irresponsible approach to the regulation or to the entire industry. I would prefer that Minister Goldsmith make it clear that this isn't within the BSA's purview,
Yep.
and then have a parliamentary discussion or an open public discussion on what any regulations may or may not look like, making sure that freedom of expression is front and centre in terms of expressing minority views, controversial views, and allowing people to have their speech online, especially when others want to seek it out. You can always turn off the radio, turn off the internet, put your app down and walk away from your phone.
Yeah, well, in theory, at least. But for a lot of us, we find that increasingly difficult to do, to be fair. This may be great news for Sean Plunkett and the platform, honestly, because it is just the sort of I'm being repressed government clampdown that in some ways the platform has been a champion of for many, many years. And hey, actually, yes, there's a court case which will take a long time, be very expensive and may go nowhere. But in the meantime, Sean Plunkett's likely to get a lot more attention, a lot more listeners, a lot more subscribers. This is the way that broadcasting tends to be heading, and honestly, my lived experience is that technology always moves faster than legislation, so try and catch up if you can.
It's a constant game to try and catch up, and sometimes it's better to be technology neutral about it, but It does need to be applicable to the type of medium. Andrew, prohibition never works. All it does, it drives more attention to it. There are more eyeballs on it. I'm certain viewership or listenership for the platform has gone up or has increased due to this attempts at either censoring or prohibition on the platform. So that's, in my view, that's never the right approach. But I do think a conversation needs to happen at a parliamentary level, and not by this move from the BSA to claim jurisdiction and just to claim it over one person, because we all know it might start with Sean Plunkett, but it won't end with Sean Plunkett.
There's many others like him in the landscape, but both here in New Zealand and overseas as well. And of course, this is what complicates it. A lot of people who have influence over our social media in New Zealand aren't New Zealand citizens, and yet trying to regulate that, trying to put the genie back in the bottle on that one would be almost impossible. Just finally on this one, Jillaine, what the Free Speech Union's official response? Are you taking the fight to the BSA on this one? Angry letters to government? How's the Free Speech Union engaging with this particular debate?
It's a great question. We believe that this is a potential, an enormous risk for freedom of expression, and for people to come in and tell you what you can say, what you can't say. The Broadcasting Authority standards of decency and good taste are so subjective, and those are standards that we do not want applied to this online media. Those are standards that are a direct threat to freedom of expression. So we are taking the fight back to them. We're figuring out our strategy. We're asking our supporters to write to Minister Goldsmith to tell the BSA that this isn't part of their remit, and we will help to defend Sean against what we do see as an incursion on the freedom of expression rights, or potentially freedom of expression rights of online media.
And hey, if it's going to court, which it looks like it's going to do, I'm sure he's trying to collect a war chest in order to be able to fight that through the courts. And again, likely to draw more publicity to his cause and to his actual platform in that regard. Jillaine, thank you so much for the work that you do in this area. So important to defend our basic rights of freedom of speech. Of course, fsu.nz, the place to go. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.